You were hiding $200,000. Thanks to that money, I was able to buy a nice house.
One day, my mother-in-law secretly bought a house without telling me. Furious, I confided in my husband.
Well, just let her do what she wants. Forget about the $200,000.
He started taking my mother-in-law's side. I couldn't forgive them for doing this to me. I'd sworn to take revenge on both. My name is Betty. 5 years ago, I married Matt, who worked at the same food company. Our busy work schedules made it hard to find quality time together, but we managed to get along well. However, my relationship with my mother-in-law isn't great. It all started during our marriage introduction at their house.
Once you marry Matt, you'll naturally support him and focus on the household, right?
I replied, actually, I plan to continue working even after marriage. Matt is fine with it. She was surprised.
What? Normally, when you marry, the wife should focus on the household. When I married my late husband, I quit my job and became a full-time homemaker.
Deep down, I felt that way, but of course, I couldn't say it directly to my mother-in-law. I could only manage a wry smile and deflect the situation.
Is Matt really okay with you continue to work? He comes home tired from work every day, and if you're not there, won't it burden him?
Mom, that's just your perspective, right? I'm fine with it. Let Betty do what she likes.
My husband's defense helped keep my mother-in-law from making more snide remarks, and after that, we left their house without further incident. Thank you today. If you hadn't stood up to your mom, she might have said even more hurtful things.
My dad passed away, so she raised me all alone. She must have worried about a lot of things. Don't let it bother you too much.
He stands up for me and cares about me. I'm lucky to be married to such a wonderful person. As we headed back to our apartment, I secretly felt happiness inside. After marrying my husband and living harmoniously together for 5 years, one day he approached me with an unexpected request. He wanted us to live with his mother.
Hey, considering how often we're both away due to work, what if Mom moved into our apartment?
Honestly, I'm not too keen on that idea.
I guess it was a sudden strange suggestion. Forget I mentioned it.
It was out of blue, and I couldn't easily agree to it. Thankfully, my husband backed down, and I felt relieved that we wouldn't be sharing our living space. About a week after my husband expressed his desire for us to live with his mother, I returned home late one evening. Work had been exhausting, and as I stood at the entrance, contemplating making dinner, I noticed the door was already unlocked. It seemed my husband had come home earlier than usual. Normally, he'd send a message saying he was on his way, but perhaps he forgot this time. Without much thought, I stepped inside. Hello.
Ah, you're finally back.
Oh, were you here? Is Matt home?
Matt hasn't returned yet. I have a spare key from him, so I let myself in.
What's going on? He gave a spare key to his mother. I never heard anything about that. I stood frozen in surprise as my mother-in-law suddenly appeared before me. She looked at me and said,
Instead of standing there, why don't you make dinner? I've been waiting for you to come home.
I stammered, haven't you had dinner yet? She replied,
No, not yet.
It's quite audacious to barge into someone's house and expect to have dinner, I thought. But I couldn't just send her away. All right. I understand. I can only make something simple, though. Is that okay? Wait, did some foodstuff disappear? I don't remember using that much. It seemed like the contents of the refrigerator had decreased since I last checked yesterday.
Make something simple and quick. I'm starving.
I replied. Please wait a moment. I'll prepare something right away. And so, I hurriedly cooked dinner and served it to my mother-in-law. She took a sip of the soup I had made and said,
"What is this? It's terrible."
"Ha." What did she just say? Clearly, she called my soup terrible.
Did you not hear me say it's terrible?
I wasn't mistaken after all. I heard correctly.
You're always working, so no wonder you can only make such bland dishes. Quit your job and focus on your household duties.
But Matt says my cooking is delicious, I protested.
That's just flattery, obviously. Don't you understand even that?
It seemed my mother-in-law still disliked the fact that I continued to work after marriage. For the next hour or so, she continued to make snide remarks.
"I'll be dropping by more often, so make sure to take care of things at home," she said as she left, seemingly satisfied with venting her frustrations.
After that, 30 minutes later, my husband returned home. "Hey, did you give a spare key to your mother?"
Yeah, I did.
Today, she suddenly showed up here, and it was such a surprise. And on top of that, she ate the meal I prepared and had the audacity to say it was terrible.
Well, it's not a big deal. Sometimes these things happen.
What kind of response was that? She just waltzed in and insulted the food I made. And yet, I was supposed to endure it. Well, it's your fault for giving her a spare key in the first place. When I said that, my husband got furious and argued back.
You should have told me you were going to live with my mother. I'm exhausted, so I'm going to bed. I don't need dinner.
And then I was the bad one. At that moment, it wasn't you who understood. With that one sentence from my husband, whom I thought was on my side, my spirit felt shattered. The next day, and the day after that.
Your house is a mess, and you're not cleaning properly. The laundry is all wrinkled. It's embarrassing.
Every day, she comes over to our house, complains, and then leaves. If that were all, maybe I could endure it. But it was becoming unbearable. After my mother-in-law started coming over to our house all the time, I noticed something strange about a week later. The groceries are disappearing again. And the detergent I had stocked up on is gone too. Our apartment is within a 10-minute walk from my mother-in-law's house, and it's clear that something is amiss when our food and household items keep vanishing. I didn't want to suspect her, but I was sure my mother-in-law was sneaking in and taking things. One day, when she visited our house, I mustered the courage to ask her directly. You haven't been taking our groceries or household items, have you?" I hoped I was just imagining things. Her response was shockingly casual.
"Oh, you've caught me."
She admitted to helping herself to our belongings. "I would appreciate it if you didn't take things without permission. These are our household items and groceries, after all."
"It's not a big deal. It's my son's house anyway. Besides, you're hardly ever home because of work, so it's not wasteful to use up the groceries."
How could she act so nonchalant and unapologetic? While it was true that my husband and I lived here, the audacity of her actions baffled me.
"Oh, by the way, I noticed you've saved up quite a bit, around $200,000. So, I used that money to buy a new house."
I was dumbfounded. What on earth was she talking about?
You don't need to play innocent. You've been hoarding it in your passbook, haven't you? I was quite surprised when I opened it.
I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. She used $200,000 in savings to buy a house without permission. And without anyone's approval. But wait, I can't withdraw money from the account with just the passbook, right? Do you know the PIN? I asked. Her response was infuriating.
You had a little note with the PIN tucked into your passbook, didn't you?
Oh, shoot. I had indeed kept a memo with the PIN, thinking no one would ever look at my passbook.
More importantly, I wanted to live in a better house. It worked out perfectly.
With a triumphant laugh, she left our home. I really couldn't forgive her. She had brazenly used our money without permission. When I told my husband about her actions, he dismissed it.
Let her do what she wants. Forget about the $200,000.
He treated it as if it were someone else's problem. Letting her use such a large sum of money without permission. I couldn't tolerate this any longer. Despite already being taken advantage of, I decided it was time for revenge against both. Letting her use such a large sum of money without permission, I decided to invite my mother-in-law to our house the next day and ask her again if she really bought the house. To have solid evidence, I discreetly activated the voice recorder on my phone before talking to her. Yesterday, you said you used $200,000 from my bank account to buy a new house. Is that true?
Yes, it's true. I've already paid the down payment, and construction has begun. After all, I have your bank book. It's as good as bought, ha ha.
I pressed further. Just having the bank book isn't enough. How do you plan to withdraw the money? Smirking, she showed me my personal seal.
How? I have this seal.
I couldn't believe it. So, you took my seal without permission, that's theft. She retorted.
Call it whatever you want. You're useless around the house, and I had no idea you'd saved up so much. At least I'll put it to good use.
It's fine. I'll give you the bank book. Thank you for coming all this way today. Despite my anger, I managed to restrain myself from hitting her and sent her home. I had evidence that she had taken the bank book and seal from our house. But for now, she could continue to be blissfully ignorant. The next day, I called my mother-in-law and invited her to our house to discuss the situation. I'm willing to give you the bank book, but withdrawing money requires personal identification. Could you leave the bank book and seal with me? I'll take care of the withdrawal. Her response was surprising.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well then, I'll bring them over right away.
Of course. There was no way I would withdraw $200,000. Besides, today, you can't just withdraw such a large sum without proper identification. How clueless could she be? Focusing only on the money, she seemed completely oblivious to the fact that her actions were criminal. With the bank book and seal back in my possession, I headed straight to the police station.
What happened? Is there some kind of incident?
Yes. My mother-in-law took my bank book and personal seal without permission and tried to buy a new house.
Huh? Aren't you the one buying it?
No, it's not me. My bank book and seal were stolen. I want to file a complaint. The police listened attentively to my story and accepted the complaint. That night, I informed my husband that I had submitted the complaint to the police. Your mother took my bank book and seal without permission, so I reported it to the police. She might get arrested.
What? Why would my mom get arrested?
Why? Can't you see that what she did is a serious crime?
Even so, you didn't have to go to the police.
It's not just about letting her do whatever she wants. Why should I hand over a large sum of money to that old hag?
Hey! Don't call my mom an old hag.
Is it okay for in-laws to do anything they want? Should I just stay silent if they come to kill me? Enough of this nonsense. I didn't save up all this money just to give it away to my mother-in-law. She's nothing but a greedy old hag.
That's enough.
My husband stormed off to his room after hearing my words. When he returned to the living room, he handed me a divorce paper.
I never thought you would say that. Sign this.
I never thought he would always have such a thing. Well, if you're going to say that, I guess I can't help it. I was already fed up with you. Are you trying to threaten me? I'll sign it, so give it to me quickly. Perhaps he didn't expect me to sign it so easily. My husband looked a little surprised. After I finished signing, I showed the divorce paper to my husband. There. Is this okay?
Yeah.
Well, I'll submit this to the city office. I guess he didn't want to see me anymore. After that conversation, he hurriedly left our house even though it was midnight. He was probably going to his mother's house. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Hello. What's the matter? It was my husband calling.
I also told my mother that you filed a police report.
I replied, yeah, so what?
Could you withdraw the complaint?
What? Impossible, I retorted. There's no way I'll withdraw it. Repentance. I won't forgive him for such a superficial apology. He'll probably do the same thing again anyway. As I thought that, my husband called again. What's going on? There's nothing to talk about, and I was about to go to bed. But it wasn't my husband on the other end of the line. It was my mother-in-law. She tearfully apologized, but does she really think that's enough to be forgiven? I won't forgive you just because you cried and apologized. And saying you didn't mean any harm. That's easy to say. Taking my bank book is one thing, but even my personal seal. I retorted.
But I wanted a house. I've always lived in apartments until now.
Are you seriously trying to use such a trivial reason to take someone else's money? You're a real jerk, I said. Why should I have to give you money for your silly reasons? I couldn't fathom it. Well, why didn't you ask your son?
My son doesn't have money.
Yes, I know. Even though we both work, I've been managing the household finances, I continued.
Then when I saw that there were $200,000 in your bank account, I couldn't help myself.
I see. But you understand that this isn't something that can be resolved with a simple apology, right? Reflect on it in prison. That money is what I've worked hard to save even before marrying your son. I can't forgive you just because you had a momentary lapse, I concluded. I tried to hang up the phone after saying that, but my mother-in-law persisted.
Wait. I have a favor to ask.
You're asking for a favor at a time like this. You've got some nerve.
I mentioned that I paid the down payment, didn't I?
Yes, you did. What about it?
I've already paid $70,000 from my longtime savings as the down payment, and now I can't just stop the construction. So, Could you lend me $200,000? I promise I'll pay it back.
How delusional are you? There's no way I'll lend you money. Not only did you take my bank book, but you also stole groceries and daily necessities. I don't believe someone like that will repay me.
But what should I do then?
I have no idea. Figure it out yourself. Ha.
But at my age, I can't get a loan anymore.
That's your own doing. Relying on someone else's money leads to situations like this. Why don't you ask your son to take out a loan for you? I couldn't help but laugh just imagining my mother-in-law in a flustered state. I'd already said what needed to be said, so maybe I should hang up the phone then. Just as I was thinking that, my husband interrupted and tried to continue the conversation.
Hey! Can't you do me a favor? Are you going to abandon my mother? You've also received help from her, haven't you? Even if it's not the full amount, please help her out.
Ha! I haven't received any help from her. She comes over every day, makes snide remarks, and leaves. She even has a spare key, but she never helped with household chores. What exactly do you mean by help? After I retorted, he fell silent. He must have said that out of desperation. Perhaps he thought appealing to my emotions would get him some assistance. Then, that's how it is. I won't offer any assistance. Good luck.
Wait. I'll figure out a way to take care of my mother, and we won't inconvenience you. Can't we avoid divorce?
Well, it's too late now. Your mother is more important to you than I am, right? You never really stood up for me.
I'm truly sorry. From now on, I'll also prioritize you, Betty.
You don't need to care about me anymore. Tomorrow, I'll be a stranger. You can happily live with your beloved mother. After saying this to my husband, I hung up the phone. Feeling bothered by the thought of another call, I turned off my mobile and went to sleep. It seemed my husband didn't come back that day. They were probably comforting each other. The next morning, I took the day off from work and submitted divorce papers at the city office. From now on, my husband and I are complete strangers. Naturally, I don't care what happens to that mother-in-law. For the 3 days until I moved out of the house, my husband didn't bother having a proper conversation with me. Of course, I didn't initiate any conversations either. For now, I plan to stay at my parents' house after leaving this one. It's an hour's commute from work, but I can still manage. As I was leaving the house where I had lived until now, my husband said just one thing.
I apologize for everything up until now.
I ignored him and walked away. Before marriage, I loved him so much, but it ended so abruptly. Strangely, I don't feel sad or anything. In fact, being able to distance myself from this messed up family feels refreshing. There's no way I'll forgive them, no matter what they say. It's their fault for always siding with my mother-in-law and ignoring me. When my mother-in-law confessed to stealing my bank book and buying a house, I wish my husband had genuinely gotten angry with her. Both my mother-in-law and ex-husband underestimated me. I won't just be a victim, I'll fight back. Now, they're bracing themselves for a life of hellish loan payments. Let them work themselves to the bone. It's what my mother-in-law wants. They both brought this upon themselves. Serves them right. As I drove toward my parents' house, That's what I thought. A week later, the police called to inform me that they had arrested my mother-in-law on suspicion of theft. Apparently, the fact that we weren't living together was crucial evidence for the arrest.
If you had been living with your mother-in-law, we might not have been able to make the arrest. There was a possibility of it falling under the category of familial theft.
I see. Thank you for arresting her. I expressed my gratitude to the police and hung up. Hopefully, this will make my mother-in-law reflect on her actions while she's in prison. Just as I was thinking that, my ex-husband called.
Hello. My mom got arrested.
I already know. The police called me.
It's impossible for me to keep paying the mortgage alone when my mom isn't here.
So what? Don't tell me you're asking for my help again.
Well.
Don't ever call me again. I ended the call unilaterally. To ensure he wouldn't bother me further, I blocked his number and messaging app. 1 month later, I heard this story from a colleague.
Hey, do you know? It might be impolite to tell you this, but it seems Matt has quit the company.
My ex-husband and I both worked at the same company, but I was an office worker, and he worked on site. Since we rarely saw each other, this was news to me. Strangely enough, my mother-in-law's theft arrest also became a rumor within the company, and it seems my ex-husband couldn't stay there anymore. Of course, I didn't go around spreading such information intentionally. As for what happened to my husband afterward, I have no idea, but he's probably struggling with loan repayments right about now. 3 years later, I got married. The person I married had no connection to the company. We met elsewhere. He genuinely cared about me. My in-laws also adore me, and I love them too. Perhaps I can finally grasp true happiness. I sincerely hope that nothing like what happened back then will occur again. How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.